Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Burlingame. It's a small-town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and my guest today is a well-known, homegrown Burlingame Civic legend, Anne O'Brien Keighran. Anne attended Our Lady of Angels Catholic Elementary School, Mercy High School, graduated in 1984, where she went on to the University of San Francisco and graduated with a degree in nursing. Anne has served the city of Burlingame for 27 years, 8 years on the Planning Commission, 17 years on the City Council, and she was a 4-time mayor. And now my conversation with Anne O'Brien Keighran. Anne, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me today. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
I've seen many of your podcasts,
Thank
so
you.
I'm looking forward to being a participant this time.
You are going to be a participant. We're going to have some fun. But I got to clarify some numbers right off the bat, okay? I happened to mention that in my intro that you were on City Council for 17 years and, 7 or 8 years on the Planning Commission, but that comes out to like 24 or 25, but I said 27. Where's the math? Where am I wrong here?
So it's 24 and a half years. I served on the Planning Commission 7.5 years because I was elected in 2005, which was in November. And so Planning Commission turns over usually in April. So that's why I'm short a few months of 8 years.
Right.
And then 17 years, you are correct, on the council.
Okay. And a 4-time mayor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk about your time in city leadership and all of that, but first I want to kind of get into your background a little bit because I did mention in the intro that you're a homegrown girl, pretty much.
Pretty much, yes. Moved down here when I was almost 10 years old.
Right. And attended Our Lady of Angels, Mercy High, and went on to USF, which is great stuff. So I interviewed a male teacher, Ryan Ofield, a few months ago. Teaches over at Mercy. He's been there for about 10 years. Just wondering, when you were there in the 80s, were there any men teachers, any male teachers, or was it just nuns and females?
Majority, definitely female and nuns. I did have one teacher, male teacher, when I was at Mercy, Mr. McGregor, and he taught religion at that time at Mercy.
Was there any other male teachers there? Was he kind of the breakthrough or what?
Not that I remember. It was predominantly nuns and female teachers.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay. What was Mercy? Remember, this is a historical society podcast, okay? So we like to know a little bit about the history of things and what you can remember. What do you remember about Mercy High School in the 80s?
It was a very tight-knit community. Many of the girls that attended Mercy at that time were from Burlingame, Millbrae, and San Mateo. So a lot of us knew each other. So it was just kind of an extended family at Mercy.
Okay. How come you chose Mercy versus Burlingame High School, St. Ignatius, or Notre Dame and Belmont? What made you choose Mercy?
Well, I live 2 blocks away from the school, so I can literally roll out of bed and run up the hill.
I think that's a pretty good answer.
So pretty convenient.
Yeah.
SI at that time was not co-ed. It was all boys school.
Oh, at that time it was?
Yes, because
okay.
I don't think SI turned co-ed until 1989.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. What did you like most about attending Mercy?
I think it was convenience, close to home, and having the camaraderie of an all-female school.
Yeah.
And so you had, many of us just had a close-knit group of friends.
Right.
And we all lived close to each other in close proximity in Burlingame. So like I said, it was just kind of an extended, nuclear family. And so when school was out, we'd probably go to each other's houses and, do our homework. And most of us played sports right after school. So it was really convenient just to be able to walk to school and walk home after we were done.
Yeah. At the time you were going to Mercy, did you have any Burlingame High School or Sarah or SI friends, or were they mostly Mercy girls that you were buddies with?
I would say predominantly it was Mercy girls.
Yeah.
Yes. Because even at that time, we didn't have like the tri-school that they do now, where you interacted. You had classes at Sarah High School and you had classes at Notre Dame. We didn't have that at that time. And so we just kind of kept, amongst our own group at that time. Yeah.
I went to Sarah in the 60s, and we didn't even come close to having any try, whatever it is.
Yeah,
okay. Oh, boy. So, people love hearing their names on the podcast. And who were some of your friends, and where did you guys hang out besides the neighborhood? Did you come to Burlingame Avenue, Broadway Burlingame? Give me some places that you like to go to.
I was actually a kid that didn't really hang out much. Went to school, played a lot of sports, and I worked. So from sophomore year through senior year, I did a lot of babysitting, and then I also did some accounting for an Italian restaurant at that time in Millbrae.
And what Italian restaurant was that?
That's a good question.
Okay.
It's escaping me at the moment.
It'll come back to you.
It might come back to me.
Okay.
Martinelli's.
Oh, gosh, that was on the El Camino.
Yes, it was right on the
that
corner
was like
there.
the steakhouse,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Famous place at one
So
time.
I started out as one of their accountants, per se, and worked through high school. And then when I started nursing school, then I worked there all 4 years as a waitress.
Really?
Yes.
Good for you.
Yeah, so they kept me on for a while. But in regards to hangout places, I would say it was Broadway. We go to Preston's. That was kind of one of the hangout places. Adeline Market was around. Mm-hmm. And Ray Park, where we play basketball.
Right.
And so those were probably kind of the main hangouts for myself.
You said you played sports. Did you play sports at Mercy?
Yes, I did.
And for the Mercy teams or something? Yeah,
Basketball
and you had no gym, and you still don't have a gym up there.
We still don't have a gym.
Right.
Hopefully that will be coming soon.
I hear that might be changing.
We've tried, multiple times, but maybe this time will be the charm.
Yeah.
But yes, so I was a big basketball player.
Did you ever come down here to the Burlingame Library where we're recording this today?
I would study here.
Good.
And I actually studied quite a bit here when I was in college.
Yeah.
So when I was at USF, this was definitely my study place. And also when I was studying for my nursing exams, I think I became an icon here because I was here every day, probably 8 hours a day for a couple months.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about the rec center? Did you ever I know we call it the community center today, but back in the day it was the Burlingame Rec Center. Did you ever spend any time or take anything over there, play any sports over there?
No, I didn't. I actually did all my sports through Mercy High School, but when I had my children, though, they all went to the community center.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Your nursing career at Sequoia Redwood City? Is that
Sequoia Redwood City,
right.
yes.
It was about 10 years?
Almost 10 years. I actually worked on their psychiatric locked ward.
Yeah.
So I did that and then also worked psych emergency services.
So 10 years, with all that time invested, it seems like a short career to me. Why? Why did you leave the profession?
I decided to take time away and raise my children. And so I became very involved in the school.
That would be two girls, right?
Yes, two girls.
2 daughters. Mm-hmm.
I actually, in addition to working at Sequoia Hospital, I did teach at USF, accelerated students going for their second degree in nursing, and then I also taught at CSM.
Yeah, really? So your master's degree gave you that opportunity to do that, correct? Yeah.
Yes. So then I got very involved at Our Lady of Angels. And so on the PTA, worked as or volunteered as a school nurse there during their lunchtime. Did yard duty, did reading to the kids, helped run their fun fairs there. So I was extremely involved in their school. And then it was shortly after, actually, it was just a year later, then I was appointed to the Planning Commission.
Yeah. Boy. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute, right? Your civic leadership. Your parents, Katie and Dennis O'Brien?
Yes.
They were very interested in city government, local government, correct?
They were. They attended, council meetings just to be informed of what went on in Burlingame. My dad was involved somewhat in politics in San Francisco. So he helped Willie Brown during his elections. He was actually one of the ones that put up all his signs. And then we were very close friends with Frank Jordan.
Oh, really?
And so my father helped Frank Jordan during his election in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it all,
that was sort of the
how
motivation,
we got involved, really.
the inspiration for
Exactly.
you. They would take you to what, city council meetings?
My mom would definitely take me to city council meetings.
And you were kind of a youngster then?
I was a youngster. I was actually, it was shortly after we moved here. So I was only about 10 years old. And I would go with her, and she, her kind of mantra was, if you're going to complain about something, then do something about it.
Great, I love that.
So that's kind of how it all started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and help me if I'm wrong with any of these facts, okay, but your first exposure to the city government was being elected as a commissioner to the Planning Commission in 1998? Is that correct?
That sounds about right.
Okay, we're close.
and you get appointed.
You get appointed.
To the Planning Commission, correct.
So you go in front of the city council? Is that how the appointment comes up, or
yes.
what?
Actually, at that time, they had a subcommittee. So it was 2 council members that would do, the interviews of the people that would apply.
Yeah.
And I know there was quite a few that applied at that time. I think there was 9 that applied for the position, and I was the only woman.
Was that a breakthrough, or had there been women on the commission?
Keighran was on the commission, Planning Commission, for quite some time. Before her, I don't know.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, now you're elected to the Planning Commission, and you have them at the City Hall, don't you?
Correct.
Your meetings?
Same as the City Council. For City Council,
right.
Correct. But there's 7 on the Planning Commission versus 5 on the City Council.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get sort of comfortable with your fellow commissioners and everything?
It didn't take that long. Maybe, it took about a year just to kind of get in the swing of things.
Yeah.
I did have some background in planning. My father was a small family developer, so I kind of knew how to read plans. And then also on the side, I had taken a couple classes at CSM in regard to planning and building code.
Great. Okay.
So I did have a background.
Good. So now you answered one of my questions, because I was going to ask you, what did you bring to the table?
Yeah.
And you just answered that. That's great. So for our listeners out there, a lot of folks really don't know what the Planning Commission does. They just have an idea. Can maybe you explain what the Planning Commission does and what some of the responsibilities of a commissioner are?
Sure. So anyone who really wants to do a remodel, let's say, of their home, or build a new home, they would come before the Planning Commission. Any of, let's say, businesses that wanted to do a major remodel, hotels that came to the city that wanted to do remodeling, or, of course, new buildings, that would go in front of the Planning Commission. Planning Commission is also in charge of developing specific area plans and zoning for the city. So that is something that comes up, frequently before them. One of the things that actually came up when I was on Planning Commission was we developed the design guidelines for the homes in Burlingame.
So what do you mean by that?
So at the time, there was a concern about mega mansions being built. And so people felt that the floor area ratio was a little too large. And they thought maybe some of the homes that were being built really didn't fit the charm of the community and the neighborhood. And so when we heard about these concerns, there was a subcommittee formed of 3 of us that worked together in developing design guidelines, so that when people come to the Planning Commission, they are given criteria of what Burlingame charm means to the city, and so to try to abide by those guidelines. So it could be the floor area ratio, the lot coverage, and also style of homes. You wanted it to kind of blend in with the existing neighborhood. So it made it a little bit easier that at least people had a roadmap, that when they brought their architects, that they knew what we were looking for.
Okay, so what about height restrictions? In other words, let's say I have a one-story home,
yes,
ranch style,
yeah,
okay? But the home next door to me gets knocked down, and the guy wants to build goes so high,
two-story, yes,
whatever. Is there a restriction to how high you can go on that?
They are allowed to have a 2-story home, up to, I think it's 30 feet. or 28 to 30 feet. And then, of course, there are exceptions to that. You can ask for a variance, because if you're on a sloped lot, well, that you look at that a little differently than a lot that is flat.
Yeah.
So yes, there are definitely restrictions to that, but we have to look at it as a holistic picture.
Were you required to go to each site when something was presented to you at the
You were strongly
meetings?
encouraged to attend the sites. So
Right.
that was something, I had put my weekends aside for, is doing all the site visits,
Yeah.
and then having the opportunity, if possible, to talk to the owners and or neighbors that were concerned
Mm-hmm.
about projects.
What about what's become popular the last couple of years, and I hope I don't blow this, but the ADUs, is that what
Yes,
what
the
you call those?
accessory dwelling units. Yes,
Say that again?
accessory dwelling units.
Oh, great. Accessory. I always thought it was additional. Okay, accessory. Thank you.
You can pick your own terminology.
What's the deal with those?
So, as you probably know, housing is difficult and not affordable here in Burlingame. And so we're trying to look at various options of how do you bring in affordable housing into the city. And so the state of California has developed criteria and recommendations and RENA numbers that they want the cities to abide by. And so accessory dwelling units was one of those options. And so they were hoping that if people were able to build accessory dwelling units, they'd be able to rent those out at an affordable rent. The advantage of an accessory dwelling unit, there's advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages of accessory dwelling units, in my personal opinion, is that you can utilize them for intergenerational family. So if you have, let's say, college students that graduated from college and can't afford to rent an apartment, an ADU is a great option for them, and they're still with the family. The other option could be you have elder parents, but you want them close to home. And so the accessory dwelling unit can really be an option for a family to do that. Or you may have an older couple that is in the primary home, but they need a caretaker.
Yeah.
And so the caretaker can utilize the accessory dwelling unit. So I think the accessory dwelling unit can play a lot of different options in a neighborhood.
Thank you. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay. And they're becoming pretty popular the last few years. Is that correct?
Many of the new homes that are being built are also building an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Yes.
As a commissioner, was there anything that you accomplished that you're, very proud of?
So I'd say there was two things. The design review guidelines, and I'd also have to give kudos to former Mayor Jerry Deal, because he was on the subcommittee with me, and he was on the Planning Commission with me. And then also Stan Vistica, who was on the Planning Commission for many years and actually really was my mentor when I joined the Planning Commission. Unfortunately, he passed away many years ago with a brain tumor. But I would say he was probably one of the best planning commissioners we have ever had in the city of Burlingame. And so design review guidelines, definitely. And also, even though it was a struggle and it didn't pass during my reign, which I'm glad it didn't at the time, was Safeway project.
Right.
That was quite a controversial project that came in front of the Planning Commission. And I do remember being the head of the Planning Commission at the time when the Safeway became quite controversial. And we had, proponents for the Safeway and people that felt it just was not the way we wanted it to be in the city of Burlingame, and having one of the meetings or two of the meetings at Burlingame High School. We originally had it at City Hall, and I actually stopped the meeting because there were too many people in the foyer that couldn't hear. And I canceled the meeting and said, we're going to do this at a bigger venue. And so we ended up having that meeting at Burlingame High School, had a couple of them, because we had probably a few hundred people that attended those meetings.
I remember them well.
Yeah. So I would say those were kind of the two, even though Safeway didn't pass at that time, I think, we made the right decision that it just wasn't the right fit for Burlingame at that time.
Yeah.
But fortunately, it was passed when I went on to council.
And it seems like it became a fit, right?
Yes, it did.
And it seemed like it satisfied a lot of folks. The late Charles Volz had a lot to do with that as well.
He did, and council member Kathy Baylock was very engaged in those conversations. And, what happened was, I left Planning Commission, and, we kind of took a hiatus for 2 years with that Safeway project just to kind of rethink. And then I came back with actually Kathy Baylock and met with the citizens of Better Burlingame and talked with them on what they thought, the needs were. And then we talked with David Bowlby, who was their representative, kind of community representative of Safeway. And he came to the citizens for Better Burlingame and came in with an open mind. And so that's when we started the conversations again. And then eventually, actually in a relatively short time period, we approved their new proposal. And so I think they've done a good job with the Safeway, and it integrated much better with our downtown.
Great. Any disappointments while on Planning Commission? Anything you were trying to get done and it never got done?
No, I don't think so on Planning Commission.
Okay.
I think we were a very busy Planning Commission. I remember, and this is what I don't miss, our meetings would go till 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that even the city council meetings can go long as well, right?
Yes.
So speaking of that, you don't really miss the Planning Commission?
I don't miss the late night meetings.
Yeah.
I still am tapped in to what goes on.
Yeah.
I look at the agendas, and I know many of the planning commissioners, so I'm always talking with them.
Right.
So I have not 100% walked away from city government at all.
Good for you. Okay, so before we get into city council, where you served for 17 years, and like I said earlier, 4-time mayor, do you miss city council?
I would say I miss it a little bit, yes.
It's a couple of years now you've been off, or 1 year?
I retired December of 2022.
Yeah.
So almost 2 years.
Yeah. And you went on to city, I think you began city council 2005?
Correct.
Right. Everybody remembers their first boss, okay? Who was on your city council your first time around? Can you remember the council people?
Kathy Baylock.
Yep.
Rosalie O'Mahony. Who were the other two? I should know this.
Well, we can come back to that.
2005.
Yeah.
Because I've gone through
quite a few.
A few people. Terry Nagel, maybe?
Okay. That's 3 ladies so far. Were there any guys? Like, was Joe Galligan around by then?
No, he had actually, I took his place.
Okay.
So when he went off. And I'm just trying to think who else.
Russ Cohen, was he involved?
He came later.
He came later?
He came later. And John Root came later. I know I'm missing someone. Ricardo came in.
2000.
Ricardo came.
I thought he came
4 years later.
Yeah.
And Michael Brownrigg was 4 years later. So I know I'm missing someone.
Well, we'll get to that. Okay. Did you have a mentor for city council?
Rosalie O'Mahony.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
How
was
long had she
definitely my
been
mentor.
on? How long had she been on the council?
I think she was a 5-time mayor, so she was 20 years.
Does she have the record?
I don't know who has the record, but I'd say she may be the person.
Yeah, I think you'd have to go back to maybe Vic Mangini days.
Yes.
I think he was 4-time like yourself, maybe 5. I can't remember either, but nonetheless,
yes,
amazing.
I know. Rosalie O'Mahony was definitely my mentor. She was actually the person that convinced me to apply for the Planning Commission.
Really?
So that's how it all started. Yes.
Okay, great. Let's see, I'm just checking my notes here because I got a lot more for you, Ann. Okay. Back in those days, and I know about attendance today, did many citizens attend city council meetings?
I think it depended on what we were talking about, the topic.
Yeah.
We did get quite a few that attended the council meetings. I think it's a little different now. You might have less people that you see in the audience, but you do have people that Zoom in.
Right.
And then you also, even though at the time I would see, quite a few people in the audience, let's say my first 2 terms for sure. It was amazing the amount of people that would watch the council meeting that I wasn't aware of. And I didn't really know that until, people would bump into me or I'd bump into them, whether it was downtown area or Molly Stone's or Lenardi's, any of the stores. I usually get cornered by someone and they'd start talking and I kind of ask, well, how did you know about, these issues? And like, oh, we watched it on TV.
Yeah.
So there's probably a lot more people than I think that attend the meeting.
When you became mayor, did you feel like you had a real good fix on the city? Did you feel pretty confident in yourself that you had mastered all the issues going on in Burlingame?
I don't think you ever master the issues completely. There's always, room for improvement. You also have to learn to compromise. And I do think, the community overall, the people that I worked with, our staff, I will say a big kudos to our staff, Burlingame staff. They are phenomenal. They're very easy to work with. They're good at their jobs. They do a lot of the research. They will sit down with, a council member anytime we need to sit down with them and talk with them. They make the job a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to have, almost 8 years of experience on the Planning Commission to bring to the council, so it was a little bit of an easier transition.
Yeah, that had to be great experience.
It definitely was.
Planning Commission's so busy, it seems like, compared to some of the other commissions, and I'm not downgrading any commission at all.
Right.
It's just that the Planning Commission always seemed to have their hands full.
Yeah, they've always been a pretty busy commission.
Yeah. So as mayor, and for time, of course, were there any certain accomplishments that you were most proud of? And that could be any term that you were mayor.
I would say probably the biggest accomplishment was revitalizing the downtown.
Is that when they tore up the sidewalks,
yes.
et cetera?
So I was mayor during
yeah.
that time, and that was definitely a challenge because there was mixed views on that. So I think many people in general thought revitalization of the downtown was a good thing. But going through that process was a very difficult one, especially for the merchants.
Absolutely.
With, streets being torn up, sidewalks being torn up, a decline in customers, difficulty, of course, finding parking because of all the road work. It was also hard, too, for residents that lived near that area because, many times we try to do the work late at night so that the merchants could keep their stores opened during the day and have a little bit less disruption, but then that made it hard, on the residents. And so I remember as mayor just kind of telling people who, were not happy at the time, or I would be getting very late phone calls from people saying, we don't want this noise going on. I said it's a process. It's kind of like, a pregnancy. It could be difficult for 9 months, but think of the end result.
Yeah.
It will be worth it in the long run. And I think we made, the right decision in moving forward with that. I think the landlords worked well with the council in developing that plan. And I mean, look at our downtown now. I mean, it is the envy of many of the peninsula cities.
All you have to do is visit it on a Saturday or Sunday, not to mention middle of the week, but the
Yes.
Saturday and Sunday, it's swarming.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
Did the merchants give you a bad time? Did you get a rough time? Because that was a rough time for them. That was about a 1 year closure or more?
It might have been more than that, probably maybe a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, they did have a hard time, and you would expect that.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was not an easy process for them. I think on the whole, they knew it would be the best thing in the long run, but it definitely hit hard with their businesses during that time. And, that's why I've always been a huge proponent of shopping locally, and still am. And, it's hard for people to see, businesses leaving. And, sometimes, people say it's, due to the rent, and that may be part of the cause. But the other cause, especially in modern day times, a lot of people shop online. And it's easy, it's convenient, yes. But it makes it much harder for our smaller merchants in Burlingame to survive.
Yeah, I think one of the things that as a, retailer back in the day, One of the hardest things that you would have to come to deal with was you wanted to donate to people and their functions, right?
Yes.
But you also wanted to see them shop in the store a little bit or tell their friends that, this store donated to us.
Absolutely.
And show some support. What year was that revitalization?
That was probably around 2016.
Yeah. And then 4 years later, those merchants had to go through the pandemic, huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
That was another
Some rough times.
difficult time, and I actually became mayor in November of 2020. So it was Emily Beach first, got the beginning definitely
Right.
of COVID.
Yeah.
And then I was getting more of the tail end.
Yeah.
And yes, it was very difficult.
Extraordinary time.
For the merchants. And it was difficult for everyone in the county because at that time I was also working as a legislative aide for Supervisor Canepa. And so one of my jobs was to work with merchants, work with tenants, work with landlords,
Yeah.
and trying to get the resources they needed
Yeah.
to move through this, pandemic.
Any disappointments while you were mayor? Or even on city council? Any disappointments? Anything you tried to get through and it just never happened?
I think I wouldn't say. Well, there is one disappointment. I think the one disappointment, and who the pioneer was with this was Rosalie O'Mahony, former mayor Rosalie O'Mahony, was the grade separation. She started that many, many years ago.
Are we talking about Broadway when you say that?
Yes, Broadway grade separation,
Yeah.
correct. And she worked very hard to get that off the ground and try to get funding, and it just wasn't working. And then, Terry Nagel was mayor, trying to push it at one point, but just at that time wasn't really getting community buy-in. And then when I became mayor, it was another thing I pushed and worked very closely with Public Works, especially Syed Martusa, Director Syed Martusa. We worked together for many, many years, and he's still our director, and he's done a phenomenal job. And we were able to get plans together, get buy-in from the community. They may not be 100% happy with it, but you have to learn to compromise. And you can't go with the view of all or nothing.
Yeah.
And so we definitely have gotten those plans approved. We've gotten some funding, and thanks to former Mayor Emily Beach. She has been an advocate for the grade separation, and her expertise has been transportation. And so she and the rest of the council, but her leading in getting some of that funding that we really need for that project. So I wish that the project was done a long time ago.
It's getting close, right?
It's getting close. So I'm hoping in the next couple years we can, get the complete amount of funding and get that work done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As mayor, as a council person, you also had to sit on some things outside the city too, didn't you?
Yes.
What did you do?
I did a lot of different committees. So I helped actually within the city, Chamber of Commerce was definitely one of the, and economic development. I always like working with the businesses. And then also the Central County Fire Board. In addition to the community master plan, I also worked with HEART, which is our Housing Endowment and Regional Trust. So that's more of a regional board. Also sat on the land use committee for the county. And so we'd be looking at kind of bigger projects that were in unincorporated areas or related to the airports. Also Home for All, that you looked at, housing for the county. So there was quite a few, within Burlingame and regional committees that I sat on over the years.
Were you required to do these things? Is there a requirement, or is it something that comes voluntarily to do that?
Nothing necessarily is a requirement per se. Of course, you have to go to your council meetings, but the expectation is there. And so, I would easily put in, 24 hours a week easily.
Oh, I bet.
For council.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depended on your time. I had more time during like the first couple terms.
Yep.
I had more time during the day. So I went more to the day meetings.
Yep.
And then later on in my term, I had more time for the evening and not during the day. The mayor actually is the person that does the assignments. And so you work in conjunction with the mayor in trying to figure out which subcommittees work best.
Yeah.
And we do try to keep consistency. And we also like to cater to people's strengths. So I was one that my strong points were planning. So anything that had to do with planning, housing, business oriented, that's kind of where my niche was.
Great.
Yeah.
How come, or did you ever think about running for Board of Supervisors during your career?
The thought came across a few times, but I felt locally I could do the most good.
Yep.
And see the results.
Okay.
I think as you move higher up the ladder, you steer farther and farther away from your constituents.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I really stuck with the local politics.
Okay.
I had the opportunity to work as a legislative aide, for one of the supervisors. So I definitely know the ins and outs. I know I could have been able to do the job, no problem, if I decided to go that route, but I decided not to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think there's in November I think there could be an opportunity for a new council person. I think Emily's going off.
Correct.
Any advice to a newcomer coming on? What would you advise them to do?
I would definitely advise to think about this position seriously. It is a lot more time than people expect. And that's what you usually hear from the newbies that go onto the council. They do not expect the amount of hours that are really expected from someone. This is not a 2-meeting-a-month job. The way I look at it, too, is you get what you put into it. And so, my expectations in looking at a council now on the other side, I have high expectations. And I expect them to, take the time to do the work and put in those hours. I think the other piece of advice I have is you need to learn to compromise. I think that's something that we are seeing evaporate, and that people have to come to the table, and you have to negotiate. You cannot come to the table with an all or nothing attitude. You might get 70% of what you want, which is better than 0.
Yeah.
And I think Burlingame on the whole has been pretty good about that. I think the Burlingame Council on the whole, after all these years of service, we have been fortunate to have a very good and dedicated council. And I think the most important thing is, we may have difference of opinions, but what I can say about our Burlingame councils, currently and the past, that you were able to walk away from the table and come back to the table and still respect each other.
Yeah. What about term limits?
That's a good question.
It is. Somebody was on council for 17 years. Yeah.
Yes. I would not be an advocate for term limits. I think it's up to the voters to make that decision. I understand why people would like to see term limits, but I do think, we are in a democracy, and I think the voters, if they don't like somebody, they don't have to vote for them. So to me, it's really the voters that are determining, who is going to be in office.
Yeah. So speaking of that, what do you think about the new redistricting laws, zoning laws or something like that? Help me with that.
So we, normally, until recently, when you had an election, it was a general election. So
citywide, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Everyone in the city has the opportunity to vote, as long as you're registered. Now they've broken Burlingame up into 5 districts. And the council had to go with districting. It wasn't something that we chose to do. I am not an advocate for districting at all.
Why?
We are a small city. We only have 30,000 people. And so when you're dividing up a city to kind of maybe, 6,000 per district, it's just too small. And I think you want to get a wide variety of candidates and be able to look at their qualifications and make the choice of who you want. When you get into small districts, you do have to remember there are many people that are registered to vote, but maybe only 35% of them vote.
Actually go, right?
So it's if you bring that down to a district, it's a very small number of people that are making a decision. And you may have a small pool of candidates, and they may not be the best qualified candidates. And then I think for a smaller district, once someone gets in and is an incumbent, I think it's going to be a little harder to get them out. Whereas in a general election, and we've seen it, that, incumbents have run and they have been ousted. But I think it's because you have a larger population that is able to vote.
Yeah.
I also look at, I would hate to see in Burlingame, I've seen it in bigger cities, that then people focus on their district and not the city as a whole. And I think it's very important, and Burlingame being small, you need to look at the city holistically. Now, districting for a larger city, like maybe San Francisco or San Mateo County, or Oakland, San Jose, that I could see a better fit.
Yeah.
Because the population's so large.
Right.
And it is hard to run a general election. And it does get to be expensive, when you're running in a larger city.
Yeah.
So I can understand it for larger cities, but I don't agree with the concept for smaller cities. If you looked at it, okay, if you have a city, maybe 75,000 and above, do districting, but 70,000 under 75,000, then do general elections. Some compromise there.
How long's it been on now? A couple of years, the redistricting?
Just a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yes.
It seems to me that when it started, I noticed less people running. I noticed less signs around town, it seems like. And I'm in District 5. Peter Stevenson's our representative, our council person, great guy.
Yeah, he was the first of the
He was the first wave,
yes.
okay.
So it's 2
it
years
just
ago.
seems like it's not as competitive as maybe it used to be.
And it was very competitive. I mean, every campaign I ran, I think there was 9 the first time I ran, 7 the second time, and I think 5 the last 2 times. So, it was always busy. Campaign season for sure. I think people were happy when it was over. But it made you work hard.
Yeah, it was a lot of area to cover, too.
Absolutely. It was a lot of area. It definitely wasn't easy. But to me, I think it really shows in your dedication.
Yep.
A smaller district, you probably don't have to work a quarter as hard as you do in a general.
I think you're absolutely right. Did you ever lose? No. Lose? Good for you. Yeah.
No, I didn't. Luckily, luckily the people liked me.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. So I know you're not on council anymore, but I know you're keeping an eye on things. What issues does the city need that you think needs attention from the city council today? Anything in particular?
I think the grade separation definitely needs to be addressed, which the council is doing. I do think we have to look at how we're going to be bringing businesses here and make sure they are successful. I would like to see futuristically more entertainment options in Burlingame. I think we've done, a very good job in the housing realm. We've built quite a bit of housing recently. I don't know if I really want to see a lot more large projects being built. I kind of want to see, what happens with the new buildings, once they're filled, and if they do get filled, how that affects our city, because you want to make sure there's no unintended consequences that we didn't think of.
Right.
And our hotels are finally kind of getting back up to maybe not what they were pre-COVID, but at least they're on the upswing. We are, seeing R&D development being built, so that'll bring more people, into the city. But I do think we need to have entertainment options, and I don't think we have much of that here.
And when you mean, say when you say that, you mean something like where you can go listen to some music,
Yes,
or
we don't really have much of that here.
a comedy store or something like that.
Comedy, or like a, let's say, a brewery, like a large brewery that is outdoor and indoor, that is bringing a young generation and an older generation.
Right.
I want to see more of that mix of generations.
Yeah. Is it going to be a challenge to fill up the new town square with offices? I mean, there's lots of office space available. Is that going to be a challenge?
That's a good question. I think Burlingame is an attractive city. I think we have, it's one of the few communities that still has kind of retained a good bit of charm, yet has been successful business-wise. I think the city council has been fiscally conservative. And so we've always had, very good reserves. We have quality services here. And people want to live here. People want to work here. So I think that's an attraction. I think our location close to the airport is a positive for us, for business people to come here. I look forward to seeing Topgolf open up.
I think we all do. That should be fun.
So that will help us, I think, in that industry. I think if we have a little more recreation related, to Topgolf that brings people here, I think that's going to be even more an advantage. I think the town square that the current city council is working on is going to be beautiful when it's done. That is going to be a big attraction to our downtown area. Our Burlingame Avenue area has been very successful, but we have to remember our downtown is just not Burlingame Avenue. It is also the connected streets in between Burlingame Avenue and Howard. Our other downtown is Broadway.
Right.
Broadway, I think, is geared more toward the locals. So we are an advantage in Burlingame where we kind of have, two downtowns. One that is geared maybe more toward the local people, and then one that is geared more toward people out of town coming into. So that is an attraction Burlingame has that many cities don't have. For sure.
Boy. Okay, let's see. Before I lose my track here, let me take a quick look. Oh, you've been away from city council now for a couple of years, but do you play a little peekaboo on Zoom, or do you drop in on a city council meeting? Yeah.
I actually was at a planning commission meeting not that long ago, last month, when they were actually talking about the gym at Mercy High School.
Great.
So I did attend that meeting. I also attended the meeting that was at Mercy. And then I also focused in on the council meeting talking about e-bikes. We're having a few little issues
I'm
around
hearing that
area.
What's the issue? They're being left around town, or what would be the issue?
Well, actually, it's more the electric.
Yes,
it's the speeding. It is going through the stop signs, going through red lights, not wearing helmets. Riding them through our parks and our downtown area. So just they're, developing some criteria with that, and also increased enforcement. I also, looked at the council meeting when they appointed the new council member, Andrea Papajohn.
Right.
So I jump in and out with some of those Zoom meetings. And then, of course, I'm still in contact with the council members that are currently on there. I'm always getting the update, and I still look at the e-news, every Thursday when it comes out from the city. So I definitely know what's going on. Took a class at the community center, and which I think was another huge success, and I was glad to see that through when I was on the council. I was actually on the original committee when we were talking about, or the community was talking about, a community center many, many years ago. So I've really seen that from day one to the finished product. So I think that was another major accomplishment the council was able to do.
That building is a real plus, isn't it?
It really is. They did a phenomenal job, and anytime I go in there, it's
being
busy.
Used.
Yes.
Yeah, it's being used. It's wonderful. All right, Ann, let's talk about what's been going on since you left council. What the heck are you doing today?
So I am now working for a nonprofit organization. It's called CAFE, and it's the Center for Age-Friendly Excellence.
Is that a local organization?
No, actually, the founder of the organization initially started in Los Altos.
Okay.
And then now my boss lives in Oregon. So we actually work from home, but the majority of our work right now is done in San Mateo County. Originally actually started in Santa Clara County. And what they do is we work with cities in assessing the unmet needs for older adults in various domains. It is in conjunction with the World Health Organization and the AARP. And so we look at various domains such as transportation, housing, social isolation, civic participation, respect, emergency services, and a few more domains. And we conduct focus groups with people ages 55 and older. And we find out from them what they feel are the unmet needs in their city. We also talk about the strengths in a city, and then what potential projects could be implemented to fit those unmet needs. And so we first started with certification criteria with the AARP and getting cities certified. And so we were quite fortunate that Supervisor David Canepa, aging is one of his top priorities, addressing aging. And so he actually had talked with my boss, Annabelle Pelham, Dr. Annabelle Pelham, and she's globally known. She taught at San Francisco State for many, many years, gerontology. And so we were able to get Measure K money from San Mateo County to work with cities to get them certified. And so we have 17 of the 20 cities in San Mateo County certified with the AARP.
Wonderful.
And
Great.
we've taken that one step further, and now we're developing action plans. And so it's we did the beginning process, and then the action plan is a 3-year process of developing potential projects in all 8 domains that staff and city council and the community can work on. And so, Mark, as you know, you were actually in one of the Burlingame focus groups.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so we developed, Burlingame itself developed their action plan. But right now I'm working with my colleagues with a few cities. We were able to get a grant from San Mateo County and then also a grant from the state of California. And so we are currently working with Daly City, Pacifica, East Palo Alto, and the city of Brisbane. And then futuristically, we'll be working with the city of Millbrae, San Carlos, Belmont, and Half Moon Bay.
Great. So the funds you're talking about that you got, or the grant you got from San Mateo County, does that kind of get divided up then among these cities you're talking about? How does that work?
We first kind of found out which cities were interested in participating, and then we had picked 4 cities to work on. So we've gone through a few grants over the this started before I started working there. I'm
Right.
a newbie there.
Mm-hmm.
But we've gone through, I think, 3 rounds, going on to our 4th round of grant money.
So the grant money, does that come from the state, and the state gets it from the feds, or how does that work? Where does this grant money come from?
So the Measure K money has come, of course, through taxpayers over the years,
Okay.
and it's divided amongst various groups in the county.
Okay.
And so they have seen through a lot of surveying that there are a lot of unmet needs for older adults, and so some of the money gets used for that. Some of the money gets used for family programs, child programs. Housing. I mean, there's just such a wide, vast.
Why would a
need.
city not want to participate in something like this?
It just depends on what their priorities are with the cities.
Yeah.
And also the staff time, because there is some staff time involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just depends on how busy a city is and also what the council looks at as a priority.
Right.
Because for some, they may not be ready to have, older adult needs as a priority in their city.
Was this something you were thinking about your last couple of years on the council? Were you aware of this, or did just this come along?
I became aware of it a few years back, and also, with my health background, I felt it would be a nice way to kind of take in my health education and also my government experience. I think it's a great pairing.
Okay.
And I also love working with older adults.
Yeah.
So
55 and older.
55 and over.
That's the older adult, right? Hear that, Ray? Okay. Where can one find out more about Cafe?
They can go on. We have a website, www.cfafe.org.
And again, is it just a California thing or is it national?
Cafe, their work is in California. They have worked with Santa Clara County. Los Altos actually, I think, was the first city certified in the state of California.
Okay.
But then now my boss moved to Oregon, and she is extending that work into Oregon.
Terrific.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
How many hours a week do you work at that?
I am working almost 5 days a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for you, Ann.
Keep it busy.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting close to the end, so I call this the shout-out time. You can shout out to your family, your husband, daughters, et cetera, so.
Thanks to my family, especially my mom and dad that actually kind of started me on this path. And then, of course, my daughters, both my daughters were intertwined with elections and our
Did they go to Mercy?
No, actually, my oldest daughter went to St. Ignatius.
We had a breakthrough, folks.
And then my younger daughter went to Notre Dame.
What?
She went to my rival school.
Right.
So it made it a little difficult. She was a volleyball player.
Yeah.
And so when we played Mercy, I would have to sit right on the border of the Notre Dame side and the Mercy side.
That's great.
So yes, they did not go to my alma mater, but that's okay.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Great. And Keighran, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and it was such a pleasure to be able to chat with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to thank Ann O'Brien Keighran for being my guest today on Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. Special thanks to my Chief of Staff, Mike Nagler, for his input and suggestions. Thanks to Kathy and Shelby LaCasey for editing and producing, the great Ray Tyler for video, original music by Bray. You can hear more of Bray at braymusic.com. This podcast was recorded on Monday, July 22nd, 2024 at the Burlingame Public Library. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this recording, and no part can be copied or replayed without the permission of the Burlingame Historical Society. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.